And how did you actually speak to the potential customers and understand the things that were most important to them, and so that you created the product that they actually wanted?
Well, by listening, by talking and listening. Sometimes in business, you do all the talking and you don't do any listening, right? So maybe, you should try. And that's what I said to I do a lot of talks in universities, and that's what I say: listen, and listen. And then from there, you develop your strategy. Because if you're the one doing the talking and not doing the listening, your strategy is not going to be consistent with what the clients want, because you haven't taken the time to listen to what they want.
Today, we're talking with Laurent Lamothe, a global thought leader, technology entrepreneur, and known as Haiti's longest-serving Prime Minister. He's a visionary leader who is driven by a deep sense of global social responsibility. Plus, he's a thought leader in social entrepreneurship, impact programs, technology, plus innovative finance. He's a successful entrepreneur who leverages his business and management expertise to develop the critical infrastructure in emerging nations. And he's recently published his new book, The Hands of the Prime Minister. Today, we'll be talking about his journey from entrepreneur to Prime Minister of Haiti, including lessons along the way. And just quickly before we get started, make sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you get the latest episodes as soon as they're released. Let's get into it. Welcome, Laurent.
Thanks, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's not often that I get to interview a Prime Minister of a foreign nation, so I'm really excited about the journey. But let's get straight into it, because I've had a look at your story, and you've excelled across your life in sports, in business, in politics. So I guess maybe a good place to start is, what was your upbringing like? Because you're a very special kind of person who can be successful in sport, plus business, plus politics. And so I'm trying to understand kind of how this all started. So maybe we can start there.
Well, I grew up in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. My father was a PhD in literature, and my mom an artist. And, so I was very close to my family growing up. My brother is 9 years older than me, is Ruben. He was the Haiti's champion when he was a junior tennis player. So my parents decided that I should follow his footsteps, and then put me into tennis. So I started very young. When I was 6 years old, I started playing tennis, and really continued, for almost 20 years. So tennis was my everyday life. Mm-hmm. It was my everything, and taught me a lot.
And you played sport for 20 years. That's and so obviously you've got that kind of sportsperson psychology, that competitive nature, the desire to win, and the ability to put in the time and the work, and to put in the discipline to achieve something. And so, you went, but you started the entrepreneurship path when, so like you were in sports, and then you started a company in 1998 at the age of 26. So that was 20 years later, right? And so, had you gone straight from sport to business? Is that what the path was like? Or were there some smaller businesses along the way where you tried and it wasn't the success of the Global Voice Group? So what was that transition from sports person across to business person?
Well, in this case, basically what we've done was, so I went to school in Haiti, and then as I was playing tennis at the same time, and then I left school, and I went, it was a deciding choice what I would do, whether I would stay on, or whether I would, go professional. What would I do? So I decided to go to university. And then, so I stopped the professional career. I went to the university, and I studied political science. And then from then, I opened the company after graduation, not the bachelor's, but the master's degree. I did an MBA also in management. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I'm, basically leaving tennis and then dedicating myself full time to my company and my business at the time. So that was started in 98. Mm-hmm. So I went straight from, I played tennis all along. Huh? So I played tennis in the juniors, and then I tried 1 year for a professional, but it was a costly endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And tennis is a hard sport, so you actually spend more money than you make. So you're running a deficit. And you cannot run it for a long time unless you start winning some money, which is very difficult in tennis.
Yeah, I think it's much harder to be successful in sport at those levels than it is in business. I think there's a lot more success available through the business pathway than it is through the sports pathway. I think there's so many sports people that put so much kind of effort and time into this thing, but it's only until they become like in the top that they start to actually make money from all of that effort. So that must have been a hard decision at the time. Is that right? Like, to transition from this thing which you've been doing for 20 years to now going down this whole nother path. What was that transition like at the age of 26?
Emotionally, it's very difficult, right? Because, that's what you do all your life. This is how you see yourself. You see yourself as the next Rafael Nadal or the next Andre Agassi. That's how you see it. And nobody can tell you any different.
Nobody.
So that's how I saw it. That's how I saw it at the time. And it was very emotionally very difficult. It was, because to stop everything and then, realize one day that you're going to choose a different career path was not easy. But it had to be done because that's life. You try your best and you keep going.
And so you did transition from sports person to successful business person. And so, how did you get the idea for the Global Voice Group, which, just for the listeners, has operated for more than 20 years in Africa and is one of the foremost ICT companies in that region, So that's become a very successful company. And so how did you kind of identify that opportunity? And then how did you grow it?
Well, at the time, I was looking for a job. I was looking for something to do. And I said, look, I had a friend of mine who had a very also large telecommunications company because it provides ICT telecommunication services within Africa. And I said, look, I'm going to, basically try my luck with my partner. So I decided to open the company with a partner, and that came along. And we launched the company called Global Voice Telecom at the time. And then in 2005, it became Global Voice Group as it provided telecom, data services, data solutions, ICT, and it became very global. And we operated in about 45 countries in the world. So it was like a mini multinational company in the technology world.
So what were some of the things which you did at the time to drive the growth, because to go to 45 countries is no small feat, So what were some of the things which you learned at school or across the experience that you had that kind of help you achieve that, the initial traction to scale it up?
Well, the most important, I would say, point and factor, the most important was, to stay focused, to basically, wake up every day, keep your focus, and make sure that your execution strategy, works. Okay. So that was the number one factor. The second factor, I would say, was, to treat everybody the way you would want to be treated yourself. So clients, suppliers, workers, co-workers, whether it's you know them well or not, you give them full respect and treated them, the best way possible, because that, buys a lot of goodwill and that enables you, okay, to I would say that gives you the foundation of success, which is treating people, the way the way you would want to be treated, and it gives people a sense of comfort. And creates a family-like atmosphere that you don't learn in Harvard Business School, that you don't learn in an MBA. It's about how you treat people, how you treat others, and it's about also the definition of doing things the right way and starting off the right way in business life.
And so, it sounds so simple, but that's not so easy sometimes. Like, as you are trying to grow quickly, as are you trying to close all these deals and recruit and all these different things that happen. And so kind of how do you maintain that style of thinking, because obviously sometimes maybe people don't treat you how you treat them, and so how do you kind of stay with that philosophy?
Well, the idea is, I would say, to start off with having a well thought out, business plan, a well thought out product, a well targeted, basically group of consumers, and listening, hearing from that group in order to have a product that's I would say, absolutely necessary for them. And this is what we try to do in Africa, is to try to develop solutions, that would cater to emerging markets. And that would, and that became, we were talking about huge amount of volume at the time. It was very difficult to connect to some of those countries. And the services that the company provided at the time was buying, large amounts of airtime in hard to reach places, underserved communities, and then resell them to large carriers around the world that needed that connectivity. So whether it was the large carriers set in the United States, in Europe, that needed to call some of those countries. So that's what basically those services, they were wholesale services for, targeting the population and ensuring the connectivity and quality connectivity at the time. So this is how it all started. So the idea was to multiply it to other countries, and of course, multiplying revenues, multiplying, income as the markets, themselves were growing. So it was all about market growth and penetration.
And how did you actually speak to the potential customers and understand the things that were most important to them, and so that you created the product that they actually wanted?
Well, by listening, by talking and listening. Sometimes in business, you do all the talking and you don't do any listening. Right. So maybe, you should try. And that's what I said to, I do a lot of talks in universities, and that's what I say, listen. And then from there, you develop your strategy. Because if you're the one doing the talking and not doing the listening, your strategy is not going to be consistent with what the clients want, because you haven't taken the time to listen to what they want.
And that's a theme across your entire experience, is to really just listen to the customers, to the people, is to really listen. And, it's not easy to listen, right? It's like sometimes, because everybody has an opinion, everybody has a thought, everyone wants to share their thought, right? And so there is a skill in being able to accept all of the information and then to then talk, and so, and I'm sure that we'll get to this across the rest of the podcast, but what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned from the business side of things, which then led to the political side of things? Because obviously you transitioned after, what was it, around 15 or so years? Then you went into politics.
It was 11 years. It was 11 years. Yeah.
And so what were some of the lessons in those 11 years that then kind of you had learned, which you had then taken to politics?
Well, one of the most important lessons at the time was that in order to succeed, you need to have a good plan. Okay? In order to see, you have to be well prepared. So you have to and that tennis taught me that is preparation. Preparation, just like in business, preparing your product, studying well your market, having the right strategy, being well documented. So basically the whole preparation side of it was very important at the time. That helped me a lot in my subsequent years in order to be, just being prepared.
And how long do you take on the planning side of things in creating a strategic plan, let's say, or a plan of attack for some specific thing, right? How long are you spending planning and creating
I do a lot of mind mapping. The way I do it now, I do a lot of mind mapping. So sometimes it depends, I have an idea, I write it down, and then I go back to it and I expand it, and then I mind map it. So basically my mapping helps me gather the thoughts and organize the thoughts and put out and then, I put it out to my teams, and then they provide the finishing, and they put it together as far as the global. But I would say the whole process, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, that's good for me to understand, because there's people who say you should plan for a while and they talk 3 months. There's some people who talk about you should plan for a few days. It's good to understand, just how long you're thinking in terms of the planning process. But it would also seem that through your business career, you would have recruited quite a lot of people, and so you would have a strong understanding of the kind of team that you really need to succeed. And so what would you say are the characteristics of a good team that can support achieving a big strategic goal?
Well, in my world, which is a technology world, is to having a good, I would say two people. One is a good chief technology officer, somebody that's going to translate your vision into a platform, into algorithms in order to execute. And then 2 is a good financial person, okay? Somebody that will develop the financial models in order for you to survive and succeed. So those would be the 2 key aspects that I would think, the finance and the technology guy.
And what do you look for in a person that has those skills, and now you're looking to kind of attract them to be part of your team? What are the personality traits, or what are the things which you look for, I guess, in the person before you hire them?
Well, I look at ambition. I look at passion, because I think you have to be passionate about your work in order to succeed. So I look at, I look you in the eyes and see the passion that you have when you're explaining and selling the product. I look at for good organizational skills, just the way the deck is presented, because I always require a deck. Just looking at the way it's done now. So if it's not done by the person, I'll see it as well, because sometimes they have to do it live. Okay, they have to prepare with me. So there is that part. And then I just look at for generally, not necessarily always well educated in terms of high school, basically good, the best schools. Doesn't have to be from Harvard or MIT or whatever. So I look at the side of the good people, the good person, the honest person, because I believe that honesty and kindness are keys to success in this case.
Honesty and kindness are keys to success. It's good to hear a leader talk about that, because there's not often examples of that at the highest levels, and so it's really interesting just to hear you say that. In 2008, you were awarded the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award, and which is a big feat. But then a year later, you left the business world and you went into the political world. What caused that transition? So why did you make that jump?
Well, after business, my friend was running for, to become president, and in Haiti, and he asked me to come and help him. So I felt sort of a higher calling, and leaving. So I took a leave of absence in order to join. It was supposed to be for a month. It turned out to be, 5 years. But I just felt that there is more to life than, doing a business to support yourself. But there is, basically the same to doing a business and then helping others, especially those that are in deep need. So I felt like making the switch, and I did.
Transitioning from the business world to the political world, what were the biggest things which you had to quickly learn to succeed in politics?
Well, the main difference between, I would say, succeeding in politics and in business is that in politics, the turnaround is not as quick. And then the convincing is much longer. And the number of people you have to convince is also much greater. So it's all about consensus building. It's all about, basically convincing not only a board, a team, consisting of a board, but a team consisting of 12 million people for your policies to work, right? So it's a difference between, but it goes back to the explanation of what you're trying to do. So building consensus is key to success in the public sector, whereas, you just have to convince a few board members in the private sector, or if you're the CEO of a small company, you just have to convince a couple of people and then you're on the way. So the speed of execution is much slower in government than it is in the private sector.
And what are some of the best ways to build that consensus? So what did you learn about, so these are the ways to really get consensus on a topic or whatever else it is?
Well, first starting to listen, you start with the listening part again. You listen to different sectors, okay? And then you try to make it work, to fit it into your strategy. If it doesn't work, you narrow it down, but you explain why you're doing it. And then you have a good communication strategy to communicate it well to the rest of the stakeholders, because running a country is convincing more stakeholders, like I was saying before. And you need to have the ability of convincing them. That's it.
You started off
It sounds simple, right?
No,
but it's not as difficult.
It sounds complicated because people are complicated, right? Generally, right? Because everybody's pretty unique. I mean, there's going to be segments of the population, but still, people is always the hardest thing to get experience with, right? Is understanding actually how to engage with people, their needs and their desires. And now that you've had to do it kind of at the highest levels, and so it does sound simple to some people. I understand the complexity of how do you kind of influence anyone, and that's always complicated, But you started off as the foreign minister, and then you became the prime minister, So kind of how did that transition happen? Because you were supposed to go for a month, and then you were there for years, and you became the highest authority in the government pretty quickly. So what was that transition, and how did that happen?
Well, the transition was mostly, I would say, based on need at the time. So I started as the equivalent of the Secretary of State, which is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And then after that, after 6 months, the president put me as Prime Minister. So I would say the biggest difference is that one, you manage a sector, the other one, you manage the entire country. And then the system in Haiti is like the prime minister is like the CEO, and the president being the chairman of the board. So you're like the hands-on every day to day, hour to hour policy follower and implementer. So it takes the right traits also to do that.
But so you were, I'm sure that you were offered the role, and many people may not have accepted it. And so again, so why did you choose to take this role? Because, it's a pretty challenging role. It's a pretty difficult role, So why did you choose to take the role, and what were you hoping to achieve?
Well, in my case, I would say accidentally. I say people call me accidental PM because I didn't even know that I was gonna get the job. So the president just sent my name down to the Congress, and then after that he informed me, and I heard it on the radio actually. So yeah. So
you were just kind of
I had to adjust really quickly.
Yeah, you had to just kind of
adjust very quickly.
Adjust very quickly, and so what were those the first month like? The first month of hey, so you've gone from Secretary of State to Prime Minister. So what was that first month like?
Well, you get a lot more phone calls, a lot more visits, a lot more hours, I should say, on the job. So the foreign minister, you go to sleep in a regular 9-to-5 job with a lot of travel. The prime minister is a 24-hour a day, non-stop job with less travel. So it's, you have to go into the detail of the nitty-gritty. So it was a tough experience, now that I think of it, but but you also do it with your passion and with your love for your country and the desire to see the country doing better. And yeah.
You made you succeeded in changing a few of the policies and kind of how the government operated in supporting the people. Like, what were some of the biggest things which you achieved in that time?
On the education front, on the foreign direct investment front, on the social front, on the security front, I think those were the four biggest gains. The security, the country became the second most secure country in the Caribbean. That's one. Second, we became, we had an education program to include over half, basically to include 90% of kids that were outside of the school back into the school system. And, education is key for any, development of any society in the world, let alone a country. So we focus a lot on the education. And foreign direct investment basically went to 350 million, up from 24 million the year before. So that's, we're very happy of that. And then most of all, I would say, but the biggest wins was against the gangs and kidnappers, in the country, because the kidnapping was very high in Haiti, and during our tenure, it's almost disappeared. Why? Because we said we're gonna go after everybody that's involved in gang-like activity. We're not gonna make any exception. And if you're a criminal, you're gonna go to jail. And that's what we had, a no-nonsense approach to that.
And how did you choose these areas? Because it's hard to have priorities in business sometimes, but it sounds like creating priorities in government is significantly harder because of the amount of stakeholders that it affects. And so how did you choose those areas to focus on?
So we decided to do it in a modern way. So we polled the population and see what is it that they wanted the most. And then we focused on that.
So you listened again.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what was the hardest thing which you had to deal with as the Prime Minister?
The hardest thing is sometimes was, I had, you always have to, first of all, the hardest to me was spending time away from my family, from my kids. Mm-hmm. That was very hard because, the kids were little and they needed their father to be with them. And I was away all the time. So that was, I think, the biggest hurdle. The second biggest hurdle is trying to manage a country that basically had very little resources and that had a lot of bad press. Okay, so doing things in a country that has a lot of bad press, trying to change things is not easy. So we focus on that, on changing the image of the country, making the country image better.
Okay, and that was done through security, through education, and the foreign investment was the proof kind of thing. It was the proof that that this was actually working.
Absolutely.
So you were there as well for the earthquake in 2010, is that right?
Yes. Well, no, I went into office in 2012, so it was 2 years after the earthquake.
And so what was it like? Because it was still being, because at the time, the country was still being rebuilt, wasn't it, in 2012?
Oh yeah, the country took several years. It's still being rebuilt today. I think it's on the tail end of it, but there is so much more to do. So much more to do.
And so, how did you deal with that, plus all these other things at the same time? Because it seems like the country had to be rebuilt, plus education, plus safety, plus corruption.
Yeah, so it's management, right? It's all about management, right? It's prioritizing. It's about execution. It's about having the right team around you, having the right people around you. So it's all about, it's all about that. So that's what I was able to accomplish, I think. Mostly had a very good team, had a bunch of young Haitians coming back to help their country that were in the top schools in the US and in the UK and elsewhere. In France, they wanted to help the country. So I created a way for them to come back and to help and to participate. I had a good youth movement into the government. And there were people that love the country and were very competent at doing so.
That's great. I mean, there's so many things to discuss, but I'm trying to keep this as a concise podcast just to kind of understand how you think, right? Because it's not often that, people can understand the challenges of actually running a country. And it seems like it's far more complicated than running even a big company. It seems like the biggest challenge, well, to me, and again, I don't have the experience, but this is a question, is around the fact that, you're never going to make everybody happy, right? Like that's the biggest thing with the population, right? Like, I don't know if you can make everybody happy. So is that a true statement, number one? And number two, if that is a true statement, I mean, like, how do you approach that?
Well, I would say the number one thing is that you're never going to make everybody happy. And that's where the leadership comes in. You need to arbitrage and listen and focus on what's the most critical points first. And then you go in a scale of priority. So it's all about ensuring that you have maximum amount of efficient decisions.
Maximum amount of efficient decisions. And how do you make efficient decisions?
Well, one is, identifying what the people want the most through, polling. And then you're putting an execution team. Then from the execution team, you're putting a team to supervise the execution. But you do it all, basically, we had an app at the time. We work with Salesforce to implement some of the dashboards in different aspects, education. We had different dashboards for fight on poverty, etc. So we had KPIs in place to ensure that decisions were being done the right way and were being met, and that the goals were being met. So that's how it's having the goals and having people get to the goals.
And so you use like a lot of your experience in business, in government as well, to really kind of take the learnings of how do you create a successful business to how do you create a successful company. It's really interesting that you use the Salesforce dashboards. That's not the first thing I would have thought about, like in terms of Salesforce application. And so you would have used that quite successfully in government. So what were the biggest lessons that you learned just from your experience as Prime Minister?
Well, the biggest lesson is not trying to don't try to overdo things. Let things play out. So be patient with the outcomes. Don't try to force things. Prepare yourself well, execute, supervise, and then be patient.
And be patient. How long is that patience? Like, is that like, to wait a year? Is it wait 2 months? Is it wait 5 years? Like how long are you talking about when it comes to patience? Because I know it's very hard for me to have patience. I'm trying to understand what you're thinking.
Well, it depends on the goals that you set for yourself, because you need to put realistic goals. That's it. You need to have realistic goals. So the patience has to be there, but you have to put realistic goals to know that, hey, this is where it's going. And you have to be patient in making sure that it happens.
And that's where just being a strong leader is helpful, because sometimes like you need to get all of the data and then you get all the insight of everyone on your team, but then you need to make the decision, and the decision has to be 100%. In that direction.
100%. Exactly. That's what it's all about.
And so were there times when that was hard, that where, there's conflicting kind of insight, there's conflicting advice, there's conflicting opinions, the data's not clear, and you have a plan regardless, and you're like, oh, well, it's not perfect, but this is the direction that we need to go?
That's part of the basically guiding and implementing the plan. So, we can adjust along the way, but generally we tended to stuck to the KPIs.
Okay, that's good. So stick to the KPIs. That's great. Right. It's very black and white in that respect, which I like. So then you left as Prime Minister, and then you established the LSL, the World Initiative. Yes. What is that initiative? Why did you transition from the Prime Ministership to LSL?
Well, the LSL was basically about, keep the models going in innovative financing and keep, telling the story to help other countries. That was the goal of LSL. LSL is still active today. The thing is, with the COVID, it went more from physical to virtual. So we do a lot of Zoom conferences and things like that. But it talks about innovative financing. It talks about making the world a better place through technology.
And what's the aim of the LSL?
So the LSL was a think tank. It's a think tank to push innovative financing and explain what that is throughout the world. Innovative financing for development.
And so what are some examples of innovative financing?
So basically, you take countries and then you apply micro levies, put them on large volume transactions, and then use the proceeds of that for a national development plan. Okay, so let's say you have large amounts of data, large amounts of calls. You put a micro tax on them, and the micro tax is being used to finance a development goal. For example, to finance your healthcare program, to a universal healthcare, to finance education policy, etc. So it's innovative financing that doesn't exist today. You put it in place in order to finance the program. So LSL, so that's what I did a lot of that during my years as PM. And then I wanted to use that also throughout the years in order to basically keep telling the story to our leaders.
So the theme is that you want to help.
That's right.
To affect change, yeah?
Exactly.
You started in business, but then you went into politics, but now you're continuing that path of trying to help as many people as possible, as many people across as many countries as possible. Is that right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so is it kind of harder now, or is it a bit easier now, kind of having moved from the Prime Minister of Haiti to establishing LSL and trying to help a lot of developing countries? What's the harder thing,
Well, it gets harder because, when you leave office, your mic is lower. But I think it's not about helping one country, it's about helping whoever needs the help. So that's what it's all about. It's ensuring that, basically those processes are updated, the micro levy ecosystem is upgraded and is expanded, and more people know about it and more people apply it. And but so harder definitely is now.
Okay, so it's definitely harder now because the microphone is lower. Is that why it's harder?
And because I resigned 7 years ago. So imagine 7 years ago, we're talking about, the beginning of the second year of the Obama administration, right? So that's a long time ago.
That is a long time ago.
Yeah. So what happens is, just like anything, you have about 1 to 5 years to keep your policies going or to do something, positive. So it's harder now because you have less access to world leaders. But it's much more refined and focused now.
Yeah, sure. The things which you're trying to achieve are very, very difficult in the world. It takes a very unique individual to have a thought, a desire, and kind of the reason to do something, but actually to follow through and go all the way, from business to politics, and now to kind of helping across all the countries to kind of improve their financing, which can help kind of everybody kind of increase their standard of living. So that's a unique individual. Yes, so you're a very unique individual. You have a few principles that you talk about and that have served you best. Yes, what are the principles that have served you best across your career, aside from listening? Because we've talked about listening. But I mean, there are other ones as well. What are they? So one is definitely listening. Two is keeping yourself up to date and current with industry trends. So if whatever industry you are, you need to be an expert at it. So you have to, study, stay ahead of the curve. That's the second principle. And then the third principle is to ensure efficiency in what you're doing. In whatever aspect of what you're doing, you need to ensure that you're not wasting your time, that you have a market, that you have people wanting to listen. And those three core principles will lead to a success story.
of some kind.
Mm.
Cannot guarantee which, but of some kind.
Yeah, sure. And you spend a lot of time planning, it seems like. Not like well, you plan a lot. Yeah. Like it might not be like a lot of time planning, but you plan everything that you do that is big. Is that right? And you spend time on the mind mapping.
Yeah, because I find it is better to have some planning rather than to just jump in. Sometimes it's good to jump in, but then with planning. Otherwise you get to a spot where your policies don't make sense.
And so, so what do you think about when you plan? So what are some of the considerations?
Well, I think about, how others would react, how will the product, what impact will it have, what would how would the competitors fight it, and how to overcome that. Contingency planning, for sure. Yeah, so generally that's what I look at.
Mm-hmm. What would you say has had the biggest impact on your success? Yeah, because you've achieved quite a lot over the years, and it's very impressive, So what would you say has contributed to that?
I think it's probably it starts with my background. I have a very diverse background. My parents also contributed a whole lot to that. But ultimately, it's planning, but it has a lot of luck also. Okay, you need to have a touch of luck. Because, you could be the hardest worker and things could not work out, right? So it's a touch of luck as well.
Touch of luck. But it does sound like you're a very hard worker. You're very efficient.
I try to be.
In terms of here's a question I have, many people, want to affect change in the world, and sometimes it seems like it's insurmountable, the challenges which people have to overcome, How do people actually affect the real change that has an impact, because there's so many conversations in social media, and in person, and, it seems so difficult sometimes to actually make a difference. And so as someone that has been at the top of the chain, what would you advise people who want to make an impact on something that's happening in the world?
Well, I think it's subjective to the person. Okay. I don't think you can give a wholesale advice on that. But if I have to say something, you have to stay in the know, stay in the trend, technology, cryptocurrency, the cancel culture, is very active these days. And then you have a whole generational shift that's happening. So you have to be able to stay ahead of the shift. Because the world is changing, It's more normal right now to take your phone and call, and dial in an Uber than it is going to a corner and look for a cab, right? So the habits are changing. It's much easier right now to pick up your phone and WhatsApp someone in China rather than to go and buy a calling card at your nearest gas station and make a call. So things are changing. So try to stay ahead of the curve, stay in the know, stay in the sectors that you see are moving. Cryptocurrency is moving very fast now, and I think it's a very good sector. Development, engineers, in terms of career, programmers, put your kids to learn how to code, because that might be a good thing for tomorrow and today in this exam. So to affect change, it's a blend. I think you have to be in the know and you have to stay ahead of the curve for sure.
So to affect change, you kind of just need to follow the changes that are already happening in the world and leverage them to kind of progress.
I would say so.
Something which you want to progress, because it's difficult otherwise. It seems so challenging because there's no leverage, So most people, they don't have leverage, And so is the technology and now the trends like a way to get leverage across a specific idea? Is that like kind of what you're saying right now? I'm just trying to understand.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, yeah, I guess you summarize it very well.
Okay. And from a business perspective, say, for example, if there's a business that wants to kind of affect to change or to help the world in some way, what's the best way for a company that has a lot more resources than an individual to help?
Many companies are doing that right now. A company like Google, for example, is helping because right now having access to a phone that has a Google, you have more information in your hand than the president of the United States did 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. Right. So tech companies are helping. Of course, they're profiting big time, but then they're helping.
Yeah.
If you look at it that way. So and it's studying, and I think it's researching, through the R&D department, or just researching trends of what would impact the world's poor more, and then coming with policies and systems to help those grow. So this is one that I would say would help. I mean, the sectors are varied.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been such a fantastic conversation just to understand the journey from sportsperson to entrepreneur to Prime Minister. It's such a unique journey. Now, you recently have published a book. Where can people purchase that book? It's called The Hands of the Prime Minister, by the way, just for the listeners. Where can people purchase that book?
So The Hands of the Prime Minister is available on Amazon.com. So you go online and you get your copy, or at the website www.handsoftheprimeminister.com. So those are the two sites where the book is available today. And it would be, it talks about a lot of the stuff that we just discussed. It talks about leadership, listening, and it's in 4 languages, French, English, Creole, and Spanish. So it caters to every culture and nationalities.
Yeah.
At least, the ones that are closer to me.
Yes.
So yeah, Amazon and handsoftheprimeminister.com is where the book can be purchased right now.
And it's highly recommended. I mean, it's not often that you get to kind of understand the full journey of someone, and kind of it's such a good book because it's kind of written as a conversation, and it's super easy to read. There's lots of photos in there, and it's got kind of so many takeaways that people can use across life. So again, Laurent, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been such a fantastic conversation. It's been so nice just to get insight into the mind of a prime minister. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
It was a pleasure, Alex. Thank you very much. And, I really enjoyed the podcast, and keep doing it. Keep up the good thing.
Thank you. Of course I will. Thanks so much, Laurent. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Growth Manifesto podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. For more episodes, please visit growthmanifesto.com/podcast. And if you need help driving growth for your company, please get in touch with us at webprofits.io.